Let's be honest, at some point, most of us have thought about losing a little bit of fat. We talk about burning it off at the gym, right? But what does that actually mean? I mean, where does it go? Well, in this explainer, we're going to break down the real science of how your body turns that stored fat into fuel. Let's get into it. So let's just start with that central mystery. When you lose weight, that fat doesn't just poof, disappear. And it's definitely not converted into muscle. That's a huge myth. It doesn't just melt away. It has to go somewhere. And it does so through this really fascinating biological process. So let's find out exactly where. Okay, first things first, it is absolutely crucial to understand that not all body fat is created equal. Nope, your body has two main types, and trust me, they have very different jobs and, more importantly, very different implications for your health. And here they are, side by side. On the left, you've got subcutaneous fat. Think of it like this. Sub means below, cutaneous means skin. So this is the stuff right under your skin, the fat you can actually pinch. It's the stuff that covers up a six-pack, so it's mostly an aesthetic concern for a lot of people. But then on the right, we have visceral fat. Now, this is the really sneaky stuff. It's the deep internal fat that wraps around your organs. A buildup of this is seriously linked to major health issues like type 2 diabetes and heart disease. The good news, though, the process to lose both is pretty much the same. So, how do we get rid of it? Well, let's follow a single fat molecule on its big adventure, all the way from a cozy storage cell to a muscle that's screaming for energy. It's a surprisingly epic journey. Okay, so let's walk through this trip. Step one is the signal. Your body needs energy, maybe because you're on a run, so it shoots out hormones like adrenaline. These act like a starting gun, flipping a switch inside your fat cells. Then comes step two, the release. An enzyme gets to work and breaks down the stored fat, which is called triglycerides, into smaller, usable bits called fatty acids. Step three is the ride. Now, you know fat and water don't mix, right? Well, your blood is mostly water, so these fatty acids can't just swim around on their own. They need a lift. A special protein called albumin acts like a taxi service, picking them up. And finally, step four, the fuel. The taxi drops the fatty acids off at a working muscle, where they get converted into pure usable energy, also known as ATP. And this whole process, this whole breakdown and release party happening in your fat cells, well, it has a fancy scientific name, lipolysis. That's it. That's the core process of fat burning. So when you consistently trigger lipolysis, those fat cells literally shrink, and your fatty tissue gets thinner. Simple as that. So you might be wondering, hey, if fat packs such a punch, why doesn't my body just use it all the time? And that is a great question. This slide shows you the trade-off. One single fatty acid molecule gives you a massive amount of energy, around 113 ATP. Compare that to a glucose molecule, a carb, which only gets you about 32. But here's the catch. Using fat is slow. Remember that whole four-step journey with the taxi? Yeah, that takes time. It can take 10, maybe even 20 minutes to really get going during exercise. Glucose, on the other hand, is already stored right there in the muscle. It's fast, it's on site, and it's ready to go now. All right, time to tackle our first big myth. You've heard this one a million times, right? Do 1,000 crunches to get a flat stomach, or do endless leg lifts for thinner thighs. The idea is called spot reduction, and, well, let's just say it doesn't quite work like that. And here's the bottom line. Your body is the boss when it comes to deciding where to pull fat from. It's based on things like your genetics and your hormones, not on which muscle you happen to be working at the moment. When you exercise, you send out a body-wide memo that says, hey, we need energy. Your body then takes that energy from its fat stores all over, from your arms, your back, your legs, your belly. You just can't point to one spot and say, take it from here, please. It just doesn't work that way. But hang on, this doesn't mean all those crunches are a waste of time. While you can't spot reduce fat, you can absolutely spot grow muscle. It's called hypertrophy. By working a specific area, you can make the muscles underneath the fat bigger and stronger. And as your overall body fat goes down, those bigger, more defined muscles will start to pop. Okay, let's move on to our second myth, and this one is a doozy. You've seen it on every treadmill and elliptical machine out there, the infamous fat-burning zone. The whole idea is that slower, low-intensity exercise is somehow better for losing fat, but is that really the case? You know, this whole concept actually comes from a tiny kernel of truth. At lower intensities, your body does burn a higher percentage of calories from fat. That's because it has plenty of time to go through that whole lipolysis taxi ride process we talked about. And that sounds amazing, right? But focusing only on the percentage is a classic case of missing the bigger picture. And this table just makes it crystal clear. Let's imagine a chill, low-intensity workout where you burn 100 total calories. A really high percentage, let's say 70%, comes from fat. Awesome! That's 70 fat calories burned. Now let's look at a high-intensity workout. You burn way more total calories, say 500. Now, a much smaller percentage of that comes from fat, maybe only 30%, because you're using more of those quick-burning carbs. But what's 30% of 500?
150. Yep, that is more than double the total amount of fat calories you burned in the so-called fat-burning zone. So, even though the percentage was lower, the high-intensity workout burned way more total calories, which means it also burned way more total fat. The percentage just doesn't tell the whole story.
So let's put it all together. If we can't spot reduce, and the fat-burning zone is pretty misleading, what actually works? What should we really be focusing on if we want effective, sustainable fat loss? So, all this science really boils down to a few simple truths. First, forget about the percentages and just focus on the big picture, the total number of calories you burn. Second, there is no single magical best exercise for fat loss. Running, lifting, cycling, dancing, the most effective one is the one you actually enjoy doing. Because at the end of the day, consistency is so much more important than intensity. And it all comes back to that one fundamental rule. You have to burn more calories than you consume.
You know, understanding all this biology is actually really empowering. It frees you from all the myths and lets you focus on what truly matters. The science itself is actually pretty simple. So the real question isn't about finding the perfect workout zone or some magic exercise. The real question is this: what will you enjoy enough to do consistently? So what's it going to be?